Hello and welcome back to Skypothesis. We are two brothers who are on a quest to keep the magic of Skyrim alive by creating immersive character builds that combine cool aesthetics, fun gameplay, and engaging roleplay. This week's build is a powerful no-crafting wizard, which is great if you're getting a bit tired of having to grind up enchanting, alchemy, or smithing. This build is unique from our other destruction mages. The Stylight Storm uses alchemy, the Shroud of Cold Harbor uses life leech and equilibrium, but this wizard features a mechanic that we've never used before. With high spell absorption, summoning from an atronach staff will instead replenish your own magicka. The same mechanic works for summoning scrolls that you craft at the atronach forge. Some might call this an exploit, but we prefer to think of it as a diegetic feature in which he expends a soul to draw magicka straight from oblivion. This made for a fun and unique playstyle that we hope you enjoy as much as we did. As always, we have timestamps in the video so you can quickly navigate between the character's backstory, roleplay, and build details, but we hope you stick with us through the whole video. So without further ado, let's start with the backstory for the Wizard of Azura's Coast. Since he has a long name, we'll refer to him as just the Wizard. As you may have guessed, this dark elf hails from the Azura's Coast region of Morrowind, the home of the famous Telvanni wizards. The eruption of Red Mountain in the 4th era significantly changed Morrowind, especially Vardenfell. We don't know too much about its current status, only that events of this era led to a significant exodus of Dunmer refugees. The wizard is a second-generation refugee whose family relocated to the Azura's Coast after a lava flow destroyed their farm in the Ascadian Isles. They were poor and did not fare much better than the slaves their Telvanni masters traded. They worked as servants, trying to piece together a modest living, but the rigid class structure of the houses keeps the poor underfoot, especially if they're from a rival house, as he was from Hlalu territory. The wizard tried desperately to learn magic, but he was never adopted into House Telvanni officially. He spent the prime of his life as nothing more than an indentured servant, running errands and doing slave work. His naive ambition led him to believe that if he worked hard enough, he would be acknowledged and opportunities would open for him. They never did. Not even an apprenticeship. He often observed the lavish lifestyle of the Telvanni in their elevated towers, looking down on the common folk. He felt a corrosive blend of jealousy and hatred for these wizards, and vowed that one day he would rise above them. He was jaded, but fortunately had a pragmatic personality, and his anger fueled a budding motivation to seek out new opportunities. And so he left Morrowind with nothing but the shirt on his back and a few supplies he lifted from his master. He lived the life of a wayfarer for a few years, keeping himself safe on the roads with his rudimentary knowledge of destruction and restoration. He heard from a passing traveler that Skyrim was home to a distant college in the far north where dark elf refugees once studied magic as cohorts with the Nords of Skyrim. In an instant, he made up his mind that he would seek out this school of the Nords. There he would commit to study and become the greatest wizard to ever hail from Azura's Coast. His arrival in Skyrim does not go as planned. He narrowly avoids death in Helgen and learns quickly the Nords are in a tumultuous war, and many do not look fondly on elves. But these snide comments from the locals do not faze him in the least. His mind is focused on his goals and the looming threat of the dragons, which he approaches with an academic curiosity. His dragon blood is a delightful discovery, something to give him an edge in his quest for power. He ravenously consumes all the knowledge that he can, and wastes no time learning from the Greybeards. The College of Winterhold is, at first, everything he hoped it would be. A place to learn magic freely, where he can advance without artificial barriers or classist constraints. Winterhold's masters willingly impart their knowledge, provided you can pay or meaningfully contribute. This loose system suits him, as he wants to rub shoulders with greatness, but not get too close to be crowded out by competitors. Early in his journey, he stumbles upon Mirwatch, an abandoned tower tucked away in a hidden corner of the Hjalmarch swamps. His need to distance himself from rival mages leads him to make this hidden rise his home. After spending so much time in Elden Ring this past year, it's fun to think of this player home like the scattered wizard towers in the lands between. I couldn't help but wonder what the story is for each of these sorcerers. They all have their own rise, distant from each other, perhaps so they don't crowd each other out in their endeavors. Power doesn't invite pleasant company. With this in mind, Mirwatch becomes his rise, his place to hoard knowledge and artifacts, separate and secure from competitive mages who might otherwise step on his toes. The Dying Earth series by Jack Vance is one of the best explorations of this type of wizard. I highly recommend you read or listen to at least the first few chapters. It captures the concept of rival wizards perfectly, and exactly how we're imagining it for this character. Speaking of competition, he keeps tabs on the other mages and magic users of Skyrim, viewing them with a sideways eye, since he measures his progress by how much better he is than his peers. He finds ways to embarrass them, like exposing Sibyl Stentor as a poor diviner by clearing out Wolfskull Cave, or taking the ebony blade from under the watchful guard of Farengar. The most important other wizard, though, is Master Neloth of Tel Mithrin. As much as it pains him to admit it, there is much to learn from this rogue Telvanni. He initially rubbed shoulders with him to scavenge about his tower for any leverage or ancient spells he could steal, but he pieces together Neloth's folly in his recent experiments, and he steps in to solve the problem, proving himself the more capable wizard, even if Neloth is too proud to admit it. He finds a capable minion in the goblin named Gogh, who becomes the wizard's underling. Every grand wizard needs a humble helper who picks up his scraps and look after the affairs of his tower. In addition to melee attacks with his spear, Gogh can summon a storm atronach, so he's a meaningful contributor to combat. Occasionally, stray lightning bolts from Gogh's atronach can refill your magicka. His journeys lead him to encounters with various Daedra, in which he uses his strong will and bullheadedness to earn their boons. He's captivated by magical artifacts and prefers to hoard them rather than invest in the tedious and unimpressive pursuit of enchanting items himself. In his mind, there are no grand displays of power to be found in the subtle craft of carefully measuring alchemy ingredients or the time spent slaving away huddled over an enchanting table. He does make use of the atronach forge, but in our mind this is less of a pursuit of study and more of a way to get quick power if you have the right materials. He is only interested in the immediate power he can take and use. At his core, he is a destruction and alteration mage who uses soul to replenish his power. With a combined 80% chance to absorb a spell, he can cast Summon Storm Atronach from his staff and consume the Atronach's power instead to replenish his own magicka. This is a strong mechanic, or exploit depending on your point of view, but at no point did it feel like cheating, since we're not using enchanted fortified destruction gear. There is still a high cost to slinging powerful spells, and spending soul to regain power is a currency that has to be managed. We've mentioned this in other build videos, but we really do not enjoy stacking fortified destruction enchantments. There comes a point when there is no meaningful cost to using a spell anymore, and the game becomes trivial and unrewarding, usually ending my playthrough. This build, on the other hand, feels liberating and strong, but without feeling cheap, since it keeps you engaged as a player, keeping an eye on your resources and preparing for combat ahead of time. Speaking of preparation, you will need to always have full soul gems to recharge your summoning staff, but it's also a good idea to stock up on summoning scrolls as well. These are essentially your restore magicka potions. Storm Atronach scrolls are crafted at the Atronach Forge with a roll of paper, charcoal, and void salts. Keep an eye out for these ingredients, and keep in mind amethyst, a soul gem, and a salt pile can be combined to make void salts. You can also substitute a silver amethyst ring instead of an amethyst gem, so hang on to those when you find them as loot. When starting the game, we highly recommend prioritizing crafting your own Storm Atronach staff. This is made with a broom, greater soul gem, or a chalcamore, and void salts. Until your alteration skill is maxed out and you can get spell absorption, this Atronach will easily carry you through the early game when you're leveling your alteration. Speaking of, this is entirely your choice, but we do recommend grinding alteration to 100 as soon as possible. We did it by picking up telekinesis from the cell in Redwater Den and casting it on something until you hit alteration level 50. Then buy Detect Life from Tolfdir and head to a population center like Riften and cast it until you finally hit level 100. From start to finish, this took us maybe 45 minutes to grind. There are other ways to do this, like fast traveling while casting telekinesis, but I couldn't get that to work reliably. Once you have alteration maxed out, switch from the Mage Stone to the Atronach, and then your soul-powered destruction can begin. In addition to slinging spells, we decided to lean into the speech skill. Speech lends itself to a particular brand of sorcery in the world of fantasy. Imagine Saruman on his tower summoning a storm with his spoken incantations. As the Dragonborn, the wizard has a unique power accessed through his voice. His ability to persuade others and get better deals from vendors is an extension of this power and represents his commanding presence. When it comes to spells and shouts, all magic is on the table, but we gravitated towards the new flare-type destruction spells added with the Anniversary Edition. These deal fire and lightning damage in an explosive radius and are a fitting choice for a power-obsessed wizard. He uses Dragonhide for protection and restoration healing when needed. He will also occasionally use a bound sword for trapping souls and sending any unwanted or enemy atronachs immediately back to oblivion. Gogh means well, but he has a tendency to summon atronachs in narrow hallways. As his master, the wizard needs to remind him when they're useful and when they're not. For shouts, this character would find all of them that he can. Unfortunately, some are locked behind questlines that aren't fitting for the character, like Disarm, Fire Breath, and Slow Time. He wouldn't join the Thieves Guild, Companions, or do the Civil War. But there are plenty of other shouts he can use in their place, and he makes it a goal to learn all that he possibly can. Cyclone and Storm Call were the grandest displays of power, so we used them whenever we could. Now let's discuss creating the character. His final gear will include a glass staff of Summoned Storm Atronach, which he crafts at Master Neloth's tower. It's functionally the same as the standard conjuration staff, but the green spikes just look amazing, and tie together with the green sash on his armor. His armor combo consists of the Mask of Clavicus Vial, which boosts speech, prices, and includes a small 5% boost to magicka regeneration. Her Hand Armor, which is enchanted with plus 25 to fortify heavy armor if you acquire it by killing the guards during the Creation Club quest Ghosts of the Tribunal. Her Hand Boots are enchanted with a whopping 70 to stamina, which is nice to have for sprinting since we aren't adding any level ups to stamina. For his gauntlets, we went with the Iron Plate Gauntlets, which came with a Fortify one-handed enchant of 25%. We picked these entirely for the aesthetic. They balance out the darker metal of the mask, plus they look dense and led to the aesthetic of him being a tank. We'll occasionally be using the bound sword for soul harvesting, so the enchantment isn't entirely useless. Consider this an open slot for you to use whatever you prefer, we just like how they look with the mask. For auxiliary gear, he will wear an Amulet of Talos to shout as often as possible, and the Mentor's Ring, which reduces the cost of all spells by 10%. For stats, we leveled with a ratio of about 2 in magic and 1 in health. Once you can comfortably cast your master level destruction and alteration spells, you can begin prioritizing health more to ensure he remains tanky into the late game. The standing stone is, of course, the Atronach Stone, which grants the 50% spell absorption needed to make this build function. For the race, we picked Dark Elf. Their starting destruction stat is 25, making them the most effective early game destruction mages. By the time you reach level 40, you will want the following perks. In Alteration, take the Novice through Master perks, Stability, and Atronach. To assemble the build, prioritize leveling this skill tree as soon as you can. In Restoration, take Novice through Adept perks, Dual Casting, Regeneration, and Respite. Once the build is put together, wards become unnecessary, so this tree is mostly just used for healing. In Conjuration, take Novice Conjuration, Mystic Binding, Soul Stealer, and Oblivion Binding. We put 2 perks in Enchanting, 1 in Enchanter, just so we can get the next perk Soul Squeezer. In Speech, we had 3 perks in Haggling, Bribery, Persuasion, Intimidation, Allure, Merchant, and Investor. This skill tree doesn't level very fast naturally, so we spent a sizable portion of his income paying the Bard's College for training. It's a worthwhile trade-off in our opinion. Finally, in Destruction, take Novice through Master perks, Dual Casting, Impact, both perks in Augmented Shock, and both perks in Augmented Flames. We gravitated to the new Flare spells, which deal both fire and lightning damage. Keep in mind we picked level 40 as a checkpoint. All magic is on the table. He could find many uses for illusion spells, and higher level restoration spells like Guardian Circle. Some additional perks to seek out are Dremora Merchant, his primary stop for selling stuff, Companion's Insight to keep Gogh safe from your destructive blasts, Force Without Effort for better stagger and better resistance to being staggered, Seeker of Sorcery for 10% reduced spell cost, and Secret of Arcana, which allows him to cast spells without a magicka cost for 30 seconds. Alright, moving on to our favorite part of every build, the special moves. These are ability combinations that comprise the unique gameplay of each character. His first special move is called Dremora Rendezvous, which is a combination of the Mask of Clavicus Vile, Dremora Merchant, and the Shrine of Zenithar at Crumbling Bastion, just north of Broken Fang Cave in the Whiterun Tundra. Here, far from any prying mortal eyes, he occasionally meets with a Dremora Merchant and is prepared to get the most coin out of doing business with the Deadlands. Up next is Consume Atronach, which forms the foundation of his gameplay. Greedy for power, he recklessly spends soul energy to absorb a Storm Atronach. This spell has an 80% chance of succeeding, but when it fails, he gets a Storm Atronach companion. Casting it a second time will not dismiss your Storm Atronach if successful. If the Atronach isn't needed, you can just smack it back to oblivion with the bound sword. Up next is the penultimate move of a power fantasy, Draconic Heart of Thunder, which is the combination of Dragonhide, Force Without Effort, Secret of Arcana, and Lightning Storm. Activate instant tank mode and unleash 30 seconds of pure channeled destruction. Also, try to stop yourself from yelling Kamehameha, it's impossible. Up next is Meteor Strike, which is the combination of Ariel's Bow, Companion's Insight, and Unbounded Fire from a high vantage. This is a spell to use when the wizard has a height advantage over a field of many foes. He rains flaming balls of white-hot fire from the sky to ignite the ground wherever they land. It's a display of pure chaotic power that can wipe out entire bandit camps. This leads right into our last special move, Rain of Fire, which is the combination of Bend Will, Secret of Arcana, and Elemental Blast. First, use Bend Will on a dragon, then right before mounting up, use Secret of Arcana. With this move, the wizard can rain down fire on the battlefield with a barrage of limitless fireballs. This is an endgame combo and a fitting send-off to reaching maximum power as the Dragonborn. To push it even further over the top, use Meteor Strike first before mounting the dragon and relish the ridiculous scene of destruction that follows. And with those special moves completed, we are ready to wrap up the Wizard of Azura's Coast. It was fun to make another pure wizard for the channel, and even more fun to try a playthrough featuring a mechanic that we've never used before. Skyrim has been an important part of our lives, and if you're watching, we're guessing you feel the same way. Thank you so much for supporting our channel by watching our build videos, and a huge thank you to Vince Fept for his composition For Those Who Still Wander, which is linked in the description. Please head over his way and show him some support for the amazing work he does. Also, be sure to check out our Discord and our merch shop if you want to get some sweet swag and support the channel even further. We have more builds planned for the rest of the year, so if you like what we do, and if you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe to keep the magic of Skyrim alive. We'll see you next time, right here on Skypothesis.